No matter your personal thoughts on or grievances with Devon Larratt, you can't deny the man has had a large impact on the progression of the modern arm wrestling scene. Whether you view that impact as something inherently positive rather than negative depends largely on your perception of the man and his actions. As with any massively popular figure on the internet with lots of viewers, the extreme ends of the curve become more populated as well as divided. This video is not meant to function as a way to praise Devon Larratt to high heavens, nor is it meant to function as a way to dig up as much dirt on him as possible and air his proverbial dirty laundry. Rather, it is meant to serve as a way to truthfully chronicle relevant parts of Devon Larratt's life and career in arm wrestling, in order to ascertain an accurate picture of the man behind the puller and his true influence on arm wrestling as a whole. Considering the fact, it seems only apt that Devon Larratt, as an arm wrestler, can be considered to have achieved a level of influence and notoriety arguably higher than anyone else in modern-day arm wrestling. I am the Arm Historian, and today I'll be your tour guide as we add the first name to our ledger of legends and look at the legend status of Devon Larratt. Before we start proper, if you enjoy my content, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the Arm Historian. Let's get on with it. Devon was welcomed into the world on April the 24th in the year 1975. His place of birth, Victoria, the capital of British Columbia, is known as the Garden City and lies in the southernmost part of the province. Devon's mother was of German descent, leading the young boy to adopt some German speech early on in life. Little is known, though, about Devon's father in the public sphere, and trying to dig more into the topic seems a little dubious at best. What is known, however, is that from a young age, his father would pass along his vision on sports, exclaiming that sports is a civilized version of war, an endeavor where people or nations could compete with each other without all the turmoil. This was a perspective Devon seemed to take with him and embody throughout his career. Devon's older brother, Shannon, would go on to become a founding father and a lead figure in the extreme body modification scene and left an undoubtedly long-lasting legacy. At age 2, Devon and family moved out to the east of Canada, more specifically to Big Island in Prince Edward's County, Ontario. Big Island, located in the Bay of Quinte, is a small island of sorts that only measures 10 by 3 kilometers. Access to the island is granted by a fixed causeway, which connects it to the rest of the county. It's fair to say Devon grew up in a rather rural part of Canada. As a young boy at the age of 4, Devon was introduced to arm wrestling by his grandmother. She would frequently visit his ancestral home to bake pies and spend time with the family. She was also known locally as being quite adept at arm wrestling, and in some circles as the best arm wrestling woman in Alberta, something which beguiled the young Devon. He would subsequently challenge his grandmother to bouts of arm wrestling for as long as she would tolerate the young boy's enthusiastic requests. Before and during Devon's teenage years, he would keep feeding his fascination for arm wrestling by participating in lunch table bouts with his elementary and high school peers. He would later go on to say he enjoyed the activity tremendously, but that he was not exactly the best at the sport from the start. In Canada, arm wrestling is quite a common pastime, which meant a lot of other children were quite adept at it already. Throughout high school, Devon became further fascinated with strength and combat sports. He tried his hand at a variety of different combat sports, the most prominent of them being judo, something he practiced on and off throughout his life. After high school, Devon decided to seek out employment and quickly moved out west to work in the oil fields. It was there that he met someone who would become a major influence in the early stages of his arm wrestling career. Dion Langell ran the welding shop at their workplace in the oil fields and was an experienced arm wrestler. He introduced arm wrestling as a sport to Devon and showed him some of the basic techniques. A mere 2 weeks after meeting Dion, around the start of 1994, Devon would get word of an arm wrestling tournament being organized relatively close by. Eager to test his mettle on the tournament scene, he participated in the amateur class and managed to snag 3rd place. He would later describe the event to be somewhat of an eye-opener for him. He realized he still had a lot to learn as far as techniques go in the sport, and this knowledge would propel him to take training more seriously and ultimately lead him to develop his strength as well as a technique and strategy on the table. Upon going back home after working in the oil fields, Devon did not forget about arm wrestling. He immediately looked for other arm wrestlers in the area and soon struck gold in nearby Picton. He hooked up with the local arm wrestling club and soon found himself training with, amongst others, legendary Canadian arm wrestler Mike Gould. After some time, Devon found himself drawn to a new career path.
Hi, welcome to the Canadian Forces Reserve Recruiting Presentation. My name is Sergeant Hensman, and for the next little bit, I'm going to walk you through what it takes to be a member of the Reserves.
The Canadian military offered not only a steady paycheck and gainful employment, but seemed like the perfect way for Devon to feed into his passion for combat sports, as well as strength. He would later describe some of the situations he found himself in as his real fight game, as opposed to arm wrestling, which was his sport fight game. He would decide on arm wrestling as being his favorite and prioritize sporting activity and found plenty of opportunities to practice it during his military career. Near the end of the millennium, Devon won his first Canadian provincials as well as national title, a goal he had set for himself since the start of his arm wrestling training. Starting out as part of the infantry, Devon found himself to also possess a natural affinity for the profession and the many rigorous physical activities that came with it. An affinity that did not go unnoticed by the army. The military saw potential in Devon's arm wrestling prowess, and in some cases sponsored the young recruits to compete in many WAF events and world championships, two of the latter taking place in Japan and Finland. Devon would see encouraging results and got as much as a bronze medal in some of the events. In 2001, Devon joined the Canadian Special Forces, an elite part of the military that would be responsible for deploying agile, special operation forces on very short notice to counter possible threats in Canada as well as abroad. Although a significant rise in his military career, this also meant that he would have less time to compete at arm wrestling frequently. During his overseas military tours in Afghanistan at this time, it appears Devon could not fully let go of the sport he had grown to love so much, as he could often be found arm wrestling his fellow troops. He would later describe the regimen he held there to be particularly conducive to his general fitness, health, and strength in arm wrestling, but kept details of his job during this time understandably sparse. Over the next years, Devon would oftentimes compete in arm wrestling during breaks in his tour and time off from his military career. He solidified himself further as the number one person to beat in Canada, as well as a formidable contender on the international scene. In 2006, after returning from a 6-month deployment, Larratt defeated Ron Bath 3-1 at a Mike Gould Classic event in Ontario, Canada. At the time, Ron Bath was considered the number 3 ranked heavyweight in North America, behind only John Brzenk and Travis Bagent. Devon Larratt has stated in the past that this was one of his favorite matches for a number of reasons, but mostly because of the difficulties and stressors of combat and the uncertainty of returning to a normal life. Larratt was shot and took shrapnel to the hand while deployed in Afghanistan, and it might be safe to say he was still adjusting to life outside of the military. He describes experiencing almost existential feelings and says to have felt something akin to a lightning bolt shooting down his spine shortly after the match. Later that same year, Devon would face off against the Ukrainian top row master Taras Ivakin in a PAL Vendetta match. In this barn burner of a match, Larratt quickly finds himself in hot water during the first 2 rounds, but both times manages to dig himself out of impossible positions and pin Taras. During the next 4 rounds, however, Taras manages to hit through the defense of Larratt and ends the match 2-4 in the Ukrainians' favor. Around this time, Devon began appearing more in one of the premier arm wrestling leagues of the time. Neil Pickup's Arm Wars was looking for ferocious arm wrestlers to participate in its super matches. Devon Larratt was a prime candidate, and his charismatic appearance as well as put-it-all-on-the-line style of arm wrestling soon appeared to be a perfect fit for the league. Devon quickly amassed several wins and found out the league was a prime place to show off one of his most impressive and notorious tendencies.
This is how easy it is being the champ. Yeah!
Devon's endurance is often talked about, but I think in the context of this video, it is worth mentioning just what kind of an outlier Devon is in this regard. Undoubtedly honed by vigorous exercise and drills in the army, Devon participated in at least 2 military Ironman races before his time in Arm Wars in and around the turn of the millennia. This grueling challenge sees its competitors race with full military gear and for part of the race carrying a big canoe.
You're number one, Dev. Just keep going your steady pace. You're doing awesome, baby.
He even went on to win one of them. He has also stated on several occasions that he's able to perform an ungodly amount of subsequent push-ups, ranging in the thousands at a time. Arm Wars served as the perfect battleground to showcase these abilities, resulting in Devon winning a lot of wars on the table. Perhaps Devon's most notable win in the Arm Wars series was against the then number 1 ranked arm wrestler and greatest of all time, John Brezink. In the past, the two had met on the table on many occasions, times where John had gotten the upper hand. This time, however, Devon showed up in incredible shape and seemed to handle the GOAT with relative ease. On several occasions, Devon had stated that this was a very important and meaningful win for him, a passing of the torch of sorts. John, however, has always held a rather sour aftertaste in regards to this match. He feels the revving was wholly inadequate, and that Devon got away with a lot during the setup. A sentiment the grey-haired GOAT still holds until this day, even bringing it up recently in a podcast with Arm Wars organizer Neil Pickup and Devon himself. With Devon still being ranked as the number 1 in the world according to Arm Wars and several other rankings at the time, including Engin's ranking, he was called upon to defend his title in the Arm Wars Super Series, taking place in 2011 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. In these matches that have since become iconic in the arm wrestling culture, Devon manages to defeat titans of the sport on the right in Richard Lupkes and Tim Bresnan, even eking out a win in a contested match versus Hollywood Don Underwood.
Devon Larratt with the win!
The match versus Don ended up 3-3, and under Arm Wars rules, the defending champion got the advantage in the case of a draw. On the 28th of June 2012, Devon had a left-hand super match against the then number 1 in the world, Andrei Pushkar. Despite coming in as a huge underdog, Devon looked to be well prepared and up to the challenge. He went on to win the match against the Ukrainian champion in a surprisingly dominating fashion, and by doing this, unifying the world title on both hands, becoming arguably the first or one of the first in history to do so. At the end of the match, Devon appears to show a by then trademark demeanor of something akin to humbled surprise, a quality that would perhaps unsurprisingly become less and less apparent as the athlete's career would go forward. Devon's new approach would morph more towards a confident brazenness, not shying away from potential trash talk before and during the match, something that would ultimately come natural to him. By 2013, a long-time issue that had been accumulating throughout the past decade of rigorous arm wrestling reared its ugly head. We all know that arm wrestling can be extremely demanding of your tendons and joints, especially when overtraining. Larratt said that both his left and right elbow joints were degraded to a point where he was in constant pain. Unable to properly compete, he was referred to a shoulder and elbow specialist at the Ottawa Hospital, where he would subsequently be diagnosed with osteoarthritis and significant extra bone buildup in his elbows, causing significant pain and a greatly decreased range of motion. The practitioners recommended surgery on both elbows, as to remove excess bone fragments and resculpt the elbow joint. Despite the relatively large scope of the surgery, it could be performed with minimal invasiveness. In the end, more than a cup of bone fragments, together with a golf ball-sized piece of abnormal bone, were extracted from Devon's arms, preserving as much of the muscles and tendons as possible in the process. Devon would undergo a similar surgery several times throughout his career, with issues returning each time, ultimately saying he was unsure about how much it actually aided him in the long run. With Devon having essentially pushed the reset button on both arms, his current number 1 status, as well as the future potential in the sport, seemed spotty at best. Around 2014, Devon noticed a significant uptick in popularity of the sport. Game of Arms had aired, and a new lucrative ESPN broadcasted league was on the horizon. Up until now, Devon had always downplayed his career in the Special Forces during his public arm wrestling appearances, even going as far as to list his profession as farmer instead, seeing as a job like that doesn't combine well with being a publicly known figure. In order to be more active on the arm wrestling scene, an aspiration he would go on to say was somewhat driven by his ego, he was relegated to a recruitment role within the army. until finally retiring completely from the profession and focusing full-time on his arm wrestling career. This also opened the doors for Devon to become more active on social media and find alternative revenue streams and ways of growing the sport and his status in it. With production of Game of Arms Season 2 getting on the way, our titular young charismatic Canadian arm wrestler, now having some more time on his hands and focusing more on arm wrestling, proved to be a perfect match for the reality show. However, after production had already begun, the show got cancelled without warning. If you want to learn more about this slice of arm wrestling history, I recommend my video on Game of Arms. After production on Season 2 of Game of Arms had ceased, Devon set his sights on its spiritual successor in tournament form. The World Arm Wrestling League was the new top-paying and highest-tier arm wrestling event in the region and promised to be quite a battleground for Devon. He quickly qualified for the championship event in 2014 and managed to place first on the left arm. In the following year, he completed the same exact feat and went home with the win on the left. The year after that, in 2016, his right hand was seemingly once again in full working order and he managed to win the Wall Championship event on both the right and left hand. By 2017, Devon had managed to once again win the championships, although this year's event was only a makeshift finals. If you want more info on Wall as a whole and this fateful year in its history, check out my video on the World Arm Wrestling League. During the subsequent couple of years, Devon would find himself as a flagship puller during the Wall Supermatch era. These matches, which include opponents like Matt Mask, Jerry Caderet, Dave Chafee, Wagner Bortolato, and Todzilla amongst others, became immensely popular and remain so until this day. The sheer spectacle and somewhat lax rules associated with Wall appeared to be the perfect playground for the precocious Devon Larratt. He went on to acquire more titles and expanded on his reputation and notoriety as a puller. In 2018, Devon got offered a super match opportunity against the champion of the East, Denis Siplenkov. Later, Devon would state this match was extremely important to him and something he had been pursuing for quite a while. Even though he was not in his best shape at that time, the athlete was eager for a match with the stout Russian. The super match was to take place on the left hand and had a significant marketing push behind it, making it a very popular event relative to arm wrestling at that time. On the day himself, Devon showed up with a rather unique hairstyle, but was woefully outclassed by Denis on the table. Devon would later go on to say he wanted the match on the right, but Igor Mazurenko and Denis Siplenkov would only agree to a left-handed match. When the COVID pandemic hit, a lot of potential matches and tournaments were cancelled, but Devon, like many others, remained active on social media. This rise in arm wrestling content, combined with many people being effectively locked in, meant arm wrestling was experiencing a renaissance of sorts on the internet. It was during this time that Devon unveiled one of his admittedly many rather eccentric training philosophies. He had been for a while training solely his right arm, letting his left only pick up some of the slack during table time. This method was called Way of the Giant Pumpkin, referring to the growing process of giant pumpkins, where all nutrients would be diverted to one ever-growing pumpkin. The pumpkin in this case being Devon's right arm. He planned on continuing this literally unbalanced training, and does so until this day. Around this time, Devon also decided to venture into the wonderful world of app development. Noticing a significant gap in the market, he quickly found a developer and expanded the team working on the application soon after. The app would be called Armbets and was made to function as a way of connecting arm wrestlers by showing you other pullers in your area, although some features of the app were not fully functioning after the first rollout. After a lull in announcements, recently Devon has said the team is making strides and soon a new, more functional version of the app will be released. After some time of inactivity in arm wrestling matches, it was revealed Devon was suffering from some rather serious health issues. He revealed in early 2021 that he had been battling with deep vein thrombosis and a pulmonary embolism. These issues could be very serious even if addressed, and it's safe to say that Devon was going through a personal low point in his life, as he would later go on to say. In the meantime, the arm wrestling world was preparing to watch Michael Todd and Devon Saganashvili duke it out on the table for the #1 spot in the sport. But because of the pandemic, and maybe also because of contract disputes, the Devon vs Michael match fell through. King of the Table, the event that would put on the match, was looking for a replacement for Devon, after which Michael contacted Devon and asked him to fill in for Devon. A sickly Devon saw this as the perfect opportunity to find motivation to get healthy and strong again. In the lead up to the Michael Todd fight, Devon would start bulking up and begin to look and feel significantly better and healthier. His social media accounts would show the man seemingly stuffing himself with all kinds of food. A favorite of his during this time were pancakes, drenched in maple syrup. The meme of Devon's pancake-eating tendencies would start to lead a life of its own and would ultimately be conflated with and used as some kind of code for performance-enhancing drugs. Although Devon has never gone out of his way to address the issue and omnipresence of PEDs in arm wrestling, he has also historically not shied away from addressing it when prompted. In a 2012 interview with Export News, Devon goes on to talk on the subject in interesting detail. He describes himself as having been a natural athlete up to that point. He also points out he has never been tested for the sport of arm wrestling and would welcome it if leagues would do so more often. He believed it would ultimately be a good thing for the sport, but admitted that it seemed financially and logistically unfeasible at the time for most leagues. Whether or not Devon still holds these same views now, more than a decade later, is doubtful. In the middle of 2021 though, the super match between Michael Todd and Devon Larratt would finally take place, organized by King of the Table. Devon showed up in his heaviest form yet, and all but dominated Michael Todd in the match, with not a single win going to the bearded American. With Devon's love for martial arts apparent, the grizzled Canadian would soon get a chance to prove his mettle in the ring. A high-profile boxing match between two notorious strongmen was to take place in 2021. Strongmen Eddie Hall and Thor Bjornsson have had long-standing beef and decided to settle it in the boxing ring. However, Eddie got injured not too long before the match was to take place. With all preparations already being in place, a substitute would soon have to be found. As an unlikely opponent, Thor would end up facing Devon Larratt. Devon had been eager to accept the match, even though he was not trained formally in boxing and would be at a severe disadvantage against a much more experienced and even bigger Thor Bjornsson. It seems as many times before in his life, Devon enjoyed and even seemed to relish the feeling of jumping headfirst into the dark and an almost assured doom. During the next weeks leading up to the match, Devon put what little time he had into preparing, as well as he could for the daunting task ahead of him. He quite literally went into boot camp and housed with several other fighters, training each day, basically immersing himself as much as possible into the for him foreign sport of boxing. Come match day, it soon became apparent that Devon's preparations were all but in vain, as the towering Thor was precise and brutal in his game plan. Devon suffered a convincing loss, but went out swinging with reckless abandon. Although maybe less relevant to arm wrestling, this match further catapulted Devon's status as someone who leaves everything on the line and does not easily back down from a fight. It should be noted that a potential extra motivator in this instance would have also undoubtedly been the financial gain and possible exposure. Shortly after his brief stint in boxing, Devon set his sights on arm wrestling again and accepted a match against the legendary John Brezink. The now older veteran Brezink was by this time having quite a run of super match wins during his unlikely return to the sport, but faced his most experienced foe yet during his comeback. After a lot of signature jockeying for position during the setup, John initiated with a ferocious hit, putting Devon to the test in a serious way. After this, it seemed smooth sailing for our titular tall Canadian, as he beat John in a brutal fashion. By the time 2022 was truly on the way, it had become clear Devon was on a one-way collision course with the undisputed #1 arm wrestler in the world, Devon Saganashvili. Devon would describe Devon as the Everest of the sport, but showed little restraint in the lead-up to the match. After some banter that quickly turned into trash talk, Devon distanced himself from the drama and his foe, while Devon eagerly continued. With the entire arm wrestling world looking on, Devon and Levon faced each other on the table at the King of the Table event in June of 2022. After a rather convincing display in round 1, where the Georgian pins the Canadian with little stoppage, Devon goes on to exert himself too much in round 2, unable to withstand the hulking force of Levon. Clearly injured now, the remaining rounds in the match have become a foregone conclusion for Devon. This quite expected loss came with the heavy price of a torn tendon and meant the path of recovery could be a relatively long one for the Canadian. Not one to sit still for a long time though, Devon quickly began rehab by spending excessive amounts of time on the arm wrestling table and enjoying a regular buffet of stem cells and sushi. It was once again time to focus on becoming the number 1, but this time potentially in a slightly lower weight class. More recently, Devon has appeared in East vs West, facing off against the experienced and sly Evgeny Prudnik from Ukraine. Devon looked to be extremely dominant on the table and mocked Prudnik relentlessly while masterfully beating him. Devon would later state the match was more close than it seemed though, as he felt himself tiring quickly. Continuing on the journey to beat Eastern heavyweights, he found himself involved in one of the most controversial matches in recent memory. Neil Pickup had decided to try his hand at a new way of approaching the lead-up to an arm wrestling super match. He had set a match between Devon and the Latvian rising star Sandris Sedis for his Armwrestling Dark Card event. Instead of simply announcing the match to the general public, Neil had devised a way to make it seem like the match came about naturally during one of his podcasts where both the pullers were coincidentally guests. The two would call each other out and exchange playful banter, with Neil seemingly hinting at setting up a match between them. Later, after a mishap during the supposed livestream of the match, the truth came out that the match had already happened quite some time before even the podcast. Devon had beaten Sandris 2 weeks earlier in a very convincing fashion, at times seemingly toying with the young puller, and thus cementing his place around the top of the heavyweight category. Even though Devon obviously had a long and storied career within the sport of arm wrestling, it seems like he is far from ready to hang up his strap. In just a few days after the release of this video, he is facing the fiery Georgian puller Gennady Kvitfinya at East vs West, a match where many have the Canadian as a favorite. After that, he is looking to have matches lined up with Denis Siplenkov and Dave Chaffee, cementing his possible ascent into the super heavyweights once again. As much as Devon inherited arm wrestling from his own elders within his family, he seems to have done the same to his own family. Jodie Larratt, Devon's high school sweetheart and ultimately wife, is quite the accomplished arm wrestler in her own right, having done quite well on the national and the WAL tournament scene. She is often seen being at her husband's side during most of his high-profile matches. Recently, Devon's children have taken up arm wrestling, with 2 of them, Habry and Auden, competing actively in tournaments and both doing very well. Auden has even started putting out arm wrestling content on YouTube, and recently it was announced that he would start training under Engin Terzi. I wish him the best in these endeavors. One common criticism often lobbed at Devon, and something some people will claim disqualifies him from obtaining a true legend status, is the opinion that Devon has hardly competed with anyone from outside of North America. There's no doubt Devon has shown a willingness to step out of his comfort zone and has pulled internationally quite a few times before. His first experiences with this came as he was still a young infantryman, as we have mentioned before. However, during his days in the Special Forces, there was a significant downturn in international opponents and events. This, of course, should be no surprise. Sometimes being abroad on missions and tours, a rigorous training and precious little real time off are not conducive to professional arm wrestling, especially if one has to travel abroad for the matches. Perhaps the most important factor at play, though, was that Devon needed to maintain some form of anonymity to effectively practice his trade, something that was made more difficult by the day by his dominance in and the growth of arm wrestling. In essence, during this time, his job did quite literally not allow him to compete abroad often. After he had acquired a role within the army that would perhaps prove to be more suitable for his arm wrestling career, however, the matches against international opponents stayed rather sparse. Devon would go on to speak on this in interviews, saying that at the time it was extremely difficult to find any opponent for himself, saying that none of the big Eastern guys could or would pull him. However you view this possible critique, by now it should be pretty clear that the current-day Devon is not at all afraid of pulling international athletes, with him continuing to face some of the best and sometimes the best in the field. It's safe to say Devon also developed a reputation of being difficult in the setup and looking for those thin lines at the edge of the rules. It's true that Devon himself has exclaimed to possess a winning above all else mentality and has often spoken in favor of having less rules, or at least less stringent rules. Following that mindset to its natural conclusion, Devon has also found himself to be a large proponent and somewhat of a spokesperson for what he calls freedom arm wrestling. Freedom gets rid of all pads and pegs and opts instead for any flat surface, allowing pullers a lot more space to maneuver in. His notorious setup debauchery and strap shenanigans will undoubtedly in some people's eyes detract from his legend status. For some, however, as long as he operates within the sometimes subjective rules, it serves as yet another example of an unrelenting will to win and understand the sport at a deep level. In the lead up to the Devon vs Levon match at King of the Table we spoke of earlier, a documentary film crew was seen to be following Devon Larratt around. Later he would reveal to his viewers online that a documentary on him was in the works, something the producers would aim to feature on Netflix in the near future, and will undoubtedly shed an even bigger light on the arm wrestler. There you have it, the story of Devon Larratt, the arm wrestler, and an illustration of the many reasons why I believe he deserves a spot amongst the legends of the arm wrestling world. I'm sure this video will attract its fair share of detractors, as well as people who will point to important things I forgot or didn't include about the man's illustrious career in the sport. This fact alone should point to an at least undeniable impact on arm wrestling as a whole and Devon's noteworthiness within it. In stark contrast to a quote from renowned early Hollywood actress and starlet Lauren Bacall on what it means to be legendary, where she says, "Legends are all to do with the past and nothing to do with the present." I believe the best may be yet to come in the case of Devon Larratt. Maybe a quote from the man himself would be a more apt summarization of his unwavering love for arm wrestling in this video. I'll arm wrestle until the day I die. Thank you for watching this behemoth of a video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Arm Historian. And as always, a major shout out to the Armians and Fingerfolk who helped make this content come to fruition. Arm Historian, out.